Tell me, is this not the cutest thing that you've ever seen in your entire life? This little baby can? Oh yeah. In December, I made $967.93 an hour between both of my print-on-demand shops. But let me explain what that actually means. Print-on-demand is not a work for an hour, get paid for an hour type of business. It is most certainly a long game, and December's numbers are a really good, accurate reflection of a lot of effort that was put in over time. There is what I consider a very large misconception about profit margins with print-on-demand. I see comments all the time saying that profit margins are entirely too low. I think traditionally we think of working and earning an income in a very transactional type of way, where we work for X amount of hours and then we get paid X amount of dollars, and kind of breaking it down into a dollar per hour type range. But unfortunately, that's not really the way that print on demand or just entrepreneurship in general works. A lot of the time with entrepreneurship, you are putting in a lot of upfront effort with no guarantee of that later reward, in the thought of it being dollars and profit. When it comes to print on demand, something that I don't feel I see enough people talk about is the amount of work and effort that is required in the beginning to get a business to this type of point, and what I'm going to be sharing in this video with my December analytics in both of my print on demand shops. Print on demand is something that is very much not instant, and I never want anybody to think that the results that I share with you today are things that were very instant or quick and didn't come without a lot of effort and time investment into it. This is a business model that very much is something that you are creating for it to pay off down the line for you. And of course, naturally with that is involving some level of risk, because you don't necessarily know if it's going to pay off. But when it does pay off and there is the reward at the end of the tunnel, I can assure you that it is definitely well worth it. And so to kind of summarize this thought process and what I have found in my own experience with print on demand, I created this graph here. And it's something that I come back to a lot because it still holds true. When you are starting out, you are putting in a ton of work, sometimes for very little or even nothing, no reward. But over time that flips and your consistent efforts do start to compound. Both of my shops have followed this exact pattern. Now, I would say that both of my shops now are kind of more so in the second half of this graph, where the effort that I put in has drastically begun to pay off for me. But let me tell you, these shops, especially the first one, spent a lot of time in the first half of this graph. Honestly, if I were to calculate how much money I was making per hour at that point, it probably would have been pennies, next to nothing. And that's really because I was figuring everything out. It was my first shop. I really didn't have any clue as to what I was doing. I was just doing anything I could think of in order to try to see the results that I was looking for. And so many of us often want to just jump immediately to the second half of this graph and just take a shortcut. But the unfortunate news is there's no shortcut. That doesn't exist. The long way is the only way. And by spending time in the first half of this graph is where you will eventually get to the second half. And that journey looks different for everybody, and that timeline looks different for everybody also. Really, that's why I wanted to show this graph. I'm hoping that it's helpful for just the visual of kind of what to expect when it comes to actually growing and scaling a print-on-demand business. But now let's get to the juicy stuff. Let's break down how my shops performed in December, starting off with how much time I spent working on both of these shops. In December, I decided to track exactly how many hours I was working in my shop. I found a very easy, free time tracking tool online where I essentially was clocking in and clocking out every single time I was working on my shops. Now, I decided to just keep this collective as a whole as the time spent on both shops. I didn't make it too specific. Sorry if you wanted that, where it was like, oh, you spent this much time on shop one and this much time on shop two. Sorry, I just lumped it into one great sum because numbers, math, making it simpler for myself. If you wanted to see a specific breakdown, let me know, and maybe I'll consider it in the future. But nonetheless, for right now, in the month of December, I spent 27 and about a half hours working on both of my print-on-demand businesses. How I typically start my days is I often like to work on my shops first thing in the morning. This involves submitting orders, reviewing any customer messages, kind of all of just the maintenance things with owning and operating a print-on-demand business. And then from there, I usually would jump into any type of listing and that type of thing. But in the month of December, I treated it more so like a maintenance month, as I like to call it, which for me, a maintenance month means just doing what I need to keep the wheels turning, submitting orders, answering customer messages. I was not actively listing at all in the month of December. Keep in mind, this was coming off of the coattails of November, which was an incredibly busy month for both of my shops, specifically my second shop that I opened up. It was a record high in my business. So no listing in December, just maintenance. Now, comparing the total hours that I worked on my print-on-demand businesses for the month of December to the total net profit of both of my shops added up together, that broke down my hourly wage to $967.93. With that, let's dive into the performance of each shop, starting with shop 1, which is the first shop that I ever made and what I consider to be more of my general shop. What you're seeing on the screen here are two different glimpses. One is from Etsy, the other is from Profit Tree, which is a profit tracking tool. You are going to see a little bit of a difference in the revenue numbers that you see, because on Profit Tree, it's actually accounting for my total adjusted revenue, and that's why you see a little bit of a difference between these two numbers. Generally, you're going to see that higher number over on Profit Tree, and your actual revenue that you see on Etsy is actually a little bit lower than what it typically is. So it's kind of annoying, but nonetheless, you can see a little bit of a difference between the two. And Profit Tree actually takes a little bit of a deeper dive into some of the cost breakdowns that I want to explain for you as well. Diving into the breakdown on Etsy, you can see the shop did $23,182.04 in revenue. That was across a total of 1,030 orders. I had nearly 20,000 visits in the shop and a 5.2% conversion rate, which I know I say that with a little bit of extra spunk. That's something that I am incredibly proud of. It is something that has slowly grown and increased since I first started this shop, and that is well above what industry standard is. So, I'm just proud of it. It's a very good conversion rate. Good job. Now on Etsy, of course, we get that overall glimpse, but let's go into the specific breakdown and see kind of where all this money ends up going and what actually gets deposited into my bank account. One of the largest expenses with print on demand is your cost of goods. Selling physical products, you have to pay for those physical products. And of course, people besides myself are making them. So the cost of goods sold, always the highest expense, and I spent $10,915.07. My second cost was shipping costs, which was $3,319.67. Transaction fees, I spent $1,726.23. Listing fees, $265. Processing fees, $1,049.02, as well as I have ad costs. Yes, I run ads. I feel like I always get very strong opinions on ads in the comments, but I love ads. I use ads as a form of gathering data and refining my listings, improving my shops. That's how I have gotten to a 5.2 conversion rate in this shop, from analyzing data, making modifications over time, and the proof is in the pudding. But nonetheless, for those who all want to let out a groan together, yes, I spent $1,460.65 on ads. Overall, this brings my profit to $7,340.45. And yes, I also still have to pay taxes. That's another question that I see often. Generally, I sit aside about 30% of my income, my net profit in my business, for taxes, and that has usually been a pretty safe amount to save for. Now, how much you pay in taxes is very individualized in terms of, you might have certain deductibles and write-offs and families and houses and all kinds of different things. I find that saving 30%, that's the advice. This is not advice for you. This is just the advice that was given to me, is typically a good number to set aside. I personally put that money into a high yield savings account so that it's also growing interest instead of just sitting there waiting to be paid to Uncle Sam. Also to add, I do work with a bookkeeper and an accountant just to make sure that I'm dotting all my I's, crossing all my T's, and everything looks looks how it's supposed to look. And I'm, again, making sure I'm saving the appropriate amount for taxes and things like that. And I encourage anybody who is starting a business, has a business, is doing print on demand, also does the same. Now, getting into shop number 2, this is the shop that I just started in 2024. I started it like late summer, early fall time, really started taking it serious around like September, October timeframe, and it had a very successful Q4. I have a whole video diving into the success of that shop and just kind of the explosion I feel it was in Q4. And a lot of that November momentum really did carry on into December for me. Again, here are just those 2 glimpses, one of Etsy, one of Profit Tree. You're going to see a little bit of a slight difference again in that revenue from Etsy to what you see on Profit Tree. On Etsy, it stated my revenue was $61,033.78. That broke down into 1,974 orders, and I had a conversion rate of 3.5%. Still not terrible, but that's definitely something that I'm going to be working on in 2025 in this shop. I would love to see this shop also see an increase in its conversion rate and trying to get over 5%. I think that would be pretty fantastic. Breaking down the costs, of course, we can see the total revenue. Again, it is a little bit higher here on Profit Tree, $69,920.30. Still, that is broken down across the same amount of orders. Nothing like that changes here, but here's the revenue and how it is broken down from there. So first I have my cost of goods sold. Of course, this is my largest expense. I spent $28,737.24. My shipping costs, which the products in this shop, they have a higher shipping cost attached to them. That's why you see such a large jump here. And that was $10,138.44. I spent $4,544.82 in transaction fees, processing fees, little under $3,000, listing fees around $700, ad costs. I know, again, this is going to make some people cringe, but $5,244.02. all leading into my operating profit, which was $19,325.97. As I shared earlier in this video, in December, my focus really wasn't towards listing anything new in these shops. It was just looking to maintain the momentum that I already had going on and just kind of make sure that the customers that I did have were having a really great experience so that they were going to leave really great reviews, which all of that trickles into continued momentum and growth in a shop. Really, the main bulk of work and time spent on both of my shops in December was in the first half, really from about like December 1st to I would say about December 18th is where I started to at least see a substantial decline in orders. Now, don't get me wrong, I still was getting a lot of customer messages, especially like leading up till Christmas. That's just very common amongst the holiday season. But after those orders really started to decline, I did take some time to enjoy the holiday season myself, spend time with my family. And I also throughout December was finalizing my program, Plan Scale Profit, which is my full course program that's inside of my community, the POD Connection. Looking ahead to January, I do imagine January to be very similar in the sense of doing just a lot of maintenance within both of those shops, submitting orders, managing customer messages. But I do plan on carving out some time to add some additional listings into shop 2. I've been brainstorming a little bit and thinking about kind of the direction and niches that I want to focus on for Q1 in that shop. And I also plan on doing more kind of like day in the life style videos. And one video that I do want to do a day in the life of is kind of just walking through a listing day and what that looks like, how I'm spending my time, my listing workflow, and that process. So if that's something that you're interested in, of course, then definitely comment down below. Now, I don't know if this flows into this next topic that I want to talk about in this video. I don't know if this is going to make sense how it's just kind of randomly plopped right here, but I don't know where else to add it and share it in this video. But I do want to address a very commonly asked question of why I don't share my shop names. And this is just common amongst many, and if not all, Etsy sellers in general, print on demand, non-print on demand. The reason that most Etsy sellers do not share their shop names, me included, is because it can be more harmful than good. Of course, I can only speak on my thought process behind it, but When I am sharing videos like this, I totally understand the natural curiosity to wanting to go and look. However, the way that Etsy works is off of conversion rate. And we already had a moment earlier where I shared with you how proud I am of my conversion rates. And by flooding a potential thousands of curious eyeballs into either of my shops, it's going to drive down that conversion. And unfortunately, just the way that Etsy's algorithm works, when you flood a lot of eyeballs to listings, it doesn't necessarily see it as good unless those eyeballs also turn into sales. And I don't think that those who are watching my videos are likely my customers for either of my shops. And so I do have to protect those shops and their integrity. I am a mom, I have a family, and these two shops do provide a substantial amount of income for my family. And so I love sharing about print on demand and these income streams and sharing as much detail as I can in videos like this. But if you're ever curious as to why I don't share my shops, that is ultimately the reason. And my goal with this video is really to show you what can happen for your print on demand shops when you're kind of operating in that second half of this graph here. That said, it's important to note that this dollar amount is going to decrease significantly coming into Q1. That is very normal. This dollar amount is very much related to the rush of the holiday Q4 season, and I'm very well aware that that is going to take a dip going into Q1. That is just the natural progression of kind of what print on demand and e-commerce in general looks like. January to September looks significantly different than October to December. My goal with this video is just to show you what can happen when you do put in above average effort into growing a print on demand business. Yes, I do say above average effort. I do think that results like this do require above average effort because they are above average results. This is not necessarily typical. This is not common, but it can happen with the right approach, the right strategies, and the right amount of commitment to actually make it happen. I'm excited to create more videos like this. I think just breaking down the numbers in this way helps give a very realistic perspective of what print on demand looks like. Of course, I want to hear your thoughts. Let me know if you enjoyed this video and if you want me to do the same once January finishes up and share all of the January metrics for both of my shops. If you are diving into the world of print on demand and are looking to scale a shop this year, then I invite you to join my community, the POD Connection. Inside is my full course program, Plan, Scale, Profit, which walks you through everything that you need to plan to get to your first 100 sales, scale to get to your first 10,000, and profit to understand all of the business fundamentals that come when you are seeing six figures in a print on demand business. There is more info about the community in the description box below if it's something that you want to check out. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't done so already, be sure to boop the subscribe button down below. As always, I hope that you are having a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. I will see you in the next one. Bye!